Hi, welcome back to my channel. Today we are going over the best books of 2024 and the worst / most disappointing books for me. So let's dive on in. We're going to start with the best because why wouldn't we do that? So we're going to start with Just for the Summer by Miss Abby Jimenez. I would also put this on my most surprising list because I have had a so-so experience with Abby Jimenez in the past. I have never had issues with her actual writing. I've always thought she's a really strong writer, but I've had issues connecting with the characters in her stories, and I didn't experience that at all with this. I was immediately connected with Justin and Emma from the very beginning. I had the best time with the two of them. We are following Emma and Justin, who are both cursed, if you will. They have this problem where every person that they date, after they break up, that person goes on to find the love of their life and get married. And Justin and Emma are basically perpetually single. Emma's best friend stumbles upon a Reddit post that Justin made talking about this experience, and she's like, oh my god, Emma, this is so you. You should DM this guy and tell him. And so they talk for a little while, and they come up with this plan that they're going to essentially fake date each other for an allotted amount of time after they discuss the parameters of their respective curses. And then break up, and then that means they'll find the loves of their lives and they'll stop being single and sad and all that good stuff. But there is so much more going on with this story below that. Emma has a really difficult relationship with her mother that she has trouble with boundaries in, but she just loves her mom so much and she wants such good things, not only for her, but for their relationship, but it does nothing but hurt her. And then Justin is about to become the sole guardian of his siblings because his mother is about to go to prison for a crime that she committed. And there's so much going on under this, but the biggest star of this story is the empathy that these two have for each other, the banter, the way that they get to know each other on such a deep level in such a short amount of time, and the general flow of the story. I think Abby Jimenez did a really good job with the balancing act of the fun, lighthearted moments with the serious moments of the story, because honestly, there was so much going on. There was a big chance that this was going to just be a giant ball of spaghetti mess, and it did not turn out that way at all. I had such a good time with this one. Okay, another big surprise. This book has turned me into an Ali Hazelwood stan. Since finishing this book, I have read 2 short stories from this woman, and I want more. I want more. I think I love her. It's Bride by Ali Hazelwood. If you told me at the beginning of the year that not only would I give an Ali Hazelwood book 5 stars, but that I would be eating the shit up and I would love every second of it and I would want more, I wouldn't have believed you. But here I am counting down the days until Deep End comes out because I'm so ready. I had the best time with Bride. So Bride follows Misery Lark, who is the daughter of a very powerful vampire. He's a councilman, but he's basically king of the vampires. And then there is Lo Moreland, who is a alpha werewolf. The werewolves, the vampires, and the humans kind of coexist. The vampires and the humans have had this treaty, but now the humans have a new governor, and that governor does not give 2 shits about Misery's dad and his power and creating any kind of alliance with them or maintaining one. So what does Misery's dad do? He goes, you know what used to work? Kinda. Was marrying off a vampire to a werewolf. We should do that again. Hey, Misery, guess what you're gonna do? And initially she's like, fuck off, go figure out a different way to fix your problem. But then she hears Lo Moreland's name, and there's an underlying mystery to that permeates through this whole story. This should not have worked for me. Nothing about this story should have worked for me, and yet every single page I was eating it up, just scrumptious, eating it up. 5 out of 5 stars, had the best time, would do it again, am gonna do it again. I will reread this at some point, I can guarantee it. There's also supposed to be a second book coming. When? I don't know. What's it about? I don't care. I'm going to be there. Next, we have a book that reminded me I love historical romance. The Worst Duke in London by Amelie Howard. This was such a fun time. I love this entire series with my whole heart. I had such a fun time with this. This is a Taming of the Shrew retelling, or if you're not familiar with that Shakespeare work, I think 10 Things I Hate About You. So we're following Lady Evangeline Rain, who prefers animals to humans. She couldn't give 2 shits about the Tawn and what respectability politics have to say, because Her dad loves her so much and he just wants her to be loved for who she is. And if that's not happening, he is more than happy to let her live at home for as long as she wants and continue her animal rescue. And then there is Gage Croft, who is the Duke of Vale. He is the newest Duke of Vale after his brother passes away in a tragic accident. And honestly, he's in a really bad way. His brother has gambled away most of their money. He is holding the dukedom together by the tiniest thread. And he has to marry a wealthy woman. He just knows like that's the answer to his problems. That's what he needs to do. But he doesn't want to just do that. He wants to rectify the situation, but he also knows that like it's not, the life he wants to live is not one that a lot of these women of the town are looking for. He's from Scotland. He does not want to stay in London. He would love to go back to Scotland. That's not a huge selling point. He also would like to know what happened to his brother, if at all possible. And there is a man whose name I can't remember right now who is trying to court Evangeline's sister. And the only way that can happen is if Evangeline also comes to London for the season, which she absolutely hates doing. Her sister is begging her to go, and she's like, no. And so what the guy who's trying to court her sister does is runs into the Duke, and he's like, hey, I know you don't have any money, but I need help. And I think I can help you out and you can help me out. And well, here's what we're going to do. You're going to get Lady Evangeline to drag her happy ass to London and stay there until this ball so many weeks into the season. That will give me time to court her sister and try and get her to marry me. I'm not saying that my end of the bargain is predicated on her marrying me. I'm just saying I need you to keep her sister in town long enough for this to happen because her dad will not let her go if her sister's not there. Gage is like, cool, I think I can do that. I don't really love the deception part of this, but I need money. And this man is not only going to pay essentially for my summer house so I can be in London, you know, doing this thing, but then also he pays for like a carriage for him and new clothes and things like that so that way he doesn't look like the shabby duke that he is right now. Here's the thing that Gage didn't account for. He and Evangeline have insane chemistry. He meets her fairly early on trying to like get to know her so that it's not this huge shock when he tries to get her to London. But he's like genuinely taken with her and he was not expecting that. The other thing he wasn't expecting is for not only her to say yes, but she's like, I'll go to London. But you and I are going to have a tryst while we're in London because I would like to be sexually gratified and I can't ask one of the random men around here, although she was very willing to if he said no, and he knew that. This was so fun. This was surprisingly steaming for the time. This flowed really well, and the conflict that you very clearly can see coming from the beginning because of the setup of the story was handled so well. I had an excellent time with this. 5 out of 5 stars. If Becca Mac has no fans, I am dead. Okay? If Becca Mac has one fan, hi, it's me. I'm here. I love her. Fall With Me might be the best book of the series. I'm sorry, Carter. I'm sorry. It might be the best book of the series. Jackson and Lennon, they're just different, okay? They're just different. I might take it back when Kara and Emmett's story eventually comes out, Breathe With Me, but we have no ETA on that right now, and I also know emotionally that will break me, but these two healed something in me, okay? So we have Jackson Riley, who is the resident playboy on the Vancouver Vipers hockey team. He gets traded what feels like every 2 to 3 years, so he will he doesn't really put down roots. He tries to befriend his teammates and their, families and show up to all the events, but he really does not feel loved. His parents, I believe, passed away. He was raised by his grandmother who loves him dearly, but she's getting older. She can't really travel to Vancouver to see him play. And they have a delightful weekly phone date and FaceTime and things. And she makes these cute little knitted and crocheted things for his cat. It's precious, but he feels really alone. And then we have Lennon, who in the beginning of the story is on her honeymoon alone because her fiance was caught sleeping with somebody mere hours before their wedding, and she tells him off and she leaves and she goes, fuck you, I'm going on our honeymoon anyway because I deserve a trip. She goes on the honeymoon, she runs into Jackson. That man gives her the night of her life, okay? Bends her like a pretzel and just really gives it to her, and she is singing his praises. And then they go their separate ways. They don't really exchange names or anything. They exchange names, I think, but not like last names, no pertinent details. Thinking this is going to be a vacation hookup and then we're going to go about our lives. Well, guess what Lennon is? Lennon is the team photographer for the Vancouver Vipers, and Jackson has no idea because it's her first day. Like, she's just starting. They run into each other. She's immediately like, oh shit, okay, I'm just gonna ignore him. This is dumb. We're not doing this. Then Lennon has an allergic reaction within like the first 20 minutes of a like family skate day. And Jackson is the one with her, like, essentially saving her because he knows about her allergy after it was mentioned during the vacation time. And after they're leaving the hospital, or as they're about to, the doctor's like, yeah, you can't be alone. You just went into anaphylactic shock. And so she goes to stay with Jackson and then accidentally becomes his roommate, but more like his roommate because they kind of hate each other. These two, best chemistry. Best chemistry. The forced proximity scenes that happen in this man cleaning out his pantry of everything that could possibly trigger an allergy in her. He threw away his Reese's Puffs for her. His Reese's Puffs. That's all I'm saying. You know what? This was also a surprise. I did not think I was going to love Butcher and Blackbird by Bryn Weaver the way I did. I thought I would have fun with it. I thought it would probably be like a good 3-star palate cleanser before I went on to read something else. This was a 5-star experience, so much so, look at those tabs. I don't do this often, and yet, tabbed and highlighted galore. I had the best time getting to know Lachlan and... No, not Lachlan. Lachlan's in book 2. Sloan and Rowan. These two are both serial killers, but in the Dexter variety, if you will. They both have day jobs. They do other things. Rowan is a chef, and I forget what Sloan does. But on their weekends, on their vacation times, they hunt down the grodiest, terrible, awful men that the system has not punished, and they get rid of them. They run into each other because while Sloan is disposing of one of those people, she gets caught in a cage, and Rowan has to rescue her, and it's hilarious. And then they play this game where they each get the name of a mark, and whoever gets to him first essentially wins, and they play it for however long, and they just kind of fall in love along the way, and it is hilarious. It is a dark comedy, a dark rom-com, if you will. There's a lot of gore in here, but it's fucking hilarious. Have a great time. Okay, I'm going to hold these up together because they belong in the same series, the Rebel Blue Branch series, and so we have Swift and Saddled and Lost and Lassoed by Lila Sage. These two were the highlight of my cowboy romance dreams this year. I had so much fun with them. So we'll start with Swift and Saddled. This is a black cat golden retriever romance. We are following Ada and Wes. Ada is trying to pick her life up. She's been divorced for a couple of years. She was in a very abusive relationship. I don't know so much physically, but definitely in an emotionally and financially manipulative situation. She doesn't know how to drive a stick shift, and her ex-husband only kept stiff shift vehicles around, so she had to walk if she needed to get somewhere or like rely on a bus system. He was really difficult with her about like things like money and things like that. So she has finally gotten away. She's in this little beater of a Honda driving up to Rebel Blue Ranch because she is going to work on a new project there. They're trying to rebuild this old like barn house that's like really dilapidated on the property and turn it into a B&B. This is Wes's big dream for bringing another stream of income into the ranch. He's never really felt like the ranch was his. He's lived there. He obviously loves it. He loves his family. But his older brother, Gus, it's always been known, like, the ranch is going to get turned over to Gus when their dad retires. And Wes just didn't feel like he really had a part of it. But he's, Baby Blue could be my thing. And that's his, like, nickname for the B&B. And so Ada is hired in to come in and oversee the reno, do all of the design work for the interior design. And in the beginning, these two hook up, not realizing who each other are. They just kind of have this moment in the Devil's Boot, because of course they do. It's the Devil's Boot, which is the town watering hole owned by Brooks from book 1. And after they have the steamiest makeout session ever, they separate, and then Ada's like, fuck, I have to go to work tomorrow. I need to not be late at my first day of the job. And she just kind of bolts. And Wes is standing there, hat in hand, like, my God, what a woman, what just happened? They run into each other, obviously, on the ranch. She doesn't realize that he's now her new boss. And so she spends all of her time trying to keep these boundaries between them. And Wes spends all of his time showing her that not all men are bad, and all he wants to do is devote the rest of his life to her. And it was so, so sweet. Watching him show up for her every day and just prove himself consistent, really, because he just showed up as himself every day, was phenomenal. And then on the firecracker end of things, Gus and Teddy. You want to see something fun? I pre-ordered this, and if you submitted your receipt for your pre-order essentially early enough to potentially win this, you got to win a print. And tell me Gus and Teddy aren't so hot. Oh my God. I love that. So we have Gus and Teddy, which if you read the first book, you're very aware. Gus is the eldest brother of Emmy, and Teddy is Emmy's best friend. These two hate each other. They can't not bicker, fight, name call the second they're in each other's presence. And what we learn is that there is some lore behind that, because 7 years ago, something happened between these two of a romantic nature. No one else knows about it, but something happened, and they allude to it over and over again on like the first 100 pages. I'm like, God damn it, if you don't tell me what happened, I'm going to scream. The tension between these two, excellent. But my favorite part is when that pressure valve finally gives and these two finally get together. Watching the two strong ones get to be soft and take care of each other, excellent. Excellent. I have seen some people call this a rip of Heartless by Elsie Silver, and where? I want to know. Because in Heartless, Cade wanted to fuck that girl the second she stepped onto his property. He acted all gruff, but that's what he wanted. I don't get that from this. Also, there's such a long history between Gus and Teddy, because Teddy has literally been around their ranch since she was like 6 years old. Like, her and Emmy, attached at the hip, absolute besties. They have been each other's lives for a very long time. She watched that man suddenly become I don't want to call it part-time, but he like shares custody with his ex of their daughter. She's watched him take that on. She's watched him take on more responsibility at the ranch. She's watched him be a brother to Emmy. And even if they didn't really like each other, she still had a lot of respect for him and the things that he was doing. And even at moments during this book, kind of in the beginning, she's like, you do know you're a good dad, right? Like, you do know you're a good son, right? Like, you're putting all yourself down out of like all of this stress, but you're not bad. And so watching all of that happen and then watching them finally get together, I personally don't get the comparisons. But I've also read the entire series. And I think if you picked this up without reading the entire series and you didn't see the like 400 pages of tension between these two before you get to their book, sure, maybe. But no, not the same thing at all. Okay, I have moved away from reading things that are classified as YA a lot in the last like 2 years. There's nothing wrong with reading young adult stories as an adult. I'm not one of those people who believes that. But I am a person who believes that things are written intentionally for certain age groups. And at times reading YA stories, it's obviously written for, a 15, 17, 18, 19-year-old person at times. And I am not that. I am a smooth 33 years old. And sometimes I don't want that. But this was so good. This is written in verse. In fact, I did kind of show you. Like, it's written in verse, which I absolutely loved. There's a really clear timeline in following our main character, whose name was Michael, I believe. Yeah, he is a gay mixed-race teen living in London. He is part Jamaican and I think part English or Dutch. I think his mom is Dutch. And he is coming to his own, kind of struggling with it, but kind of not, in that his mom is very loving, very supportive, very open. He has more trouble, I think, with his Jamaican side of the family, which is a common thing that happens, unfortunately. But you're watching him try to figure out himself and where he belongs and what he's supposed to do. And it was so beautiful. I highly recommend the audio if you can. I believe Dean Addo reads this himself. I've never read something more stunningly beautiful. Do you like Elizabeth Acevedo? Same caliber. Same caliber. He won an award, Stonewall Book Award. So it's quality, high quality shit. Okay, this actually was a big surprise. I got sent this by Mariner Books and I was really appreciative of it. And I was also really shocked at how much I enjoyed this short social commentary, kind of twisty AI situation. It's Annie-Bot by Sierra Greer. This is like 240 pages of chaos. And I mean that so lovingly. We are following Annie, who is a bot who is basically meant to be a live-in girlfriend for Doug. And she's supposed to be the perfect epitome of what a human girlfriend would be. But the more she tries to conform to what Doug wants, the more, not human she becomes, but flawed she becomes, because what Doug wants are flaws and he doesn't realize it. And so you're watching her try to conform to this, but also maintain her autonomy. She is not a standard issue bot of the company that's come out. She has a specific type of firmware in which she can kind of adjust things on her own, or Doug can go in and change things. There is really good commentary here on what it means for us to substitute human connection with AI, especially in this because she's in physical form. Watching him punish her at times and honestly be downright abusive was very hard. And for the longest time, I just thought I was going to be reading a book about an AI woman suffering in a, different form than human suffering. But it was so much more than this. You come into it and you're like, oh, robot sex doll. And you leave and you're just like, damn, Annie, Free Willy. That's the pipeline that happens here. I don't really want to give more than that, but those are the vibes and it's incredible. And I think if you can stick it out through the toughest parts of Doug, the story pays off in the end. I know a lot of people have a hard time with that kind of like middling part with him, but I think it's worth it. I think it's incredible. I think about parts of this book monthly, and I read this back in like February. It's that good. Okay, this was a complete and utter shock because I hated the first book in this series. I was incredibly disappointed by it. And then I read this and I'm still not sure that the same person wrote these two books, because this had such good emotional depth. This had really good plotting. This had really good conversation. This had really good commentary. It's Wildfire by Hannah Grace. I wanted to throw Icebreaker through the window when I was done with it. And with this, I sat staring out the window, wondering when I could see these two again. Russ and Aurora, if you have daddy issues and you read this, prepare not only to be seen, but ready to fight, okay? Because every once in a while, they would say something and I was like, God damn, I did not get signed up to hurt like this. And yet, I kept turning the pages. I really appreciated the space that these two made for each other to bloom. Russ never tried to quiet Aurora, and I liked that Aurora never tried to rush Russ. He's a really quiet guy. He's well liked. He's really popular, but he's definitely on the shyer side. He's really quiet, and he sometimes just needs some space to collect his thoughts before he starts speaking. And a lot of people don't give him that space, or they assume things about him because he doesn't immediately start responding to things. And Aurora spent this summer giving Russ space to just be. And I don't know if there's anything better than watching two characters feel seen by each other. It was great. It was incredible. Okay, then we have what was one of my most anticipated books of the summer. And I had a lot of fun with it. I gave it 5 stars, but the more I think about it, I don't know if it will remain a 5-star, but it will remain a highly recommended good time. It's Voyage of the Damned by Frances White. I am obsessed with this edition in particular. Barnes & Noble, you popped off. It's gorgeous. Like, please. Excuse me. So this is a story about a country called Concordia. And in Concordia, there are 12 magical blessings, which are in 12 people. And they each are from 12 different provinces. Let's call them provinces. So we're following Ganymedes, who I'm trying to remember what he goes by. D. He goes by D. And he was such a imperfect mess of a character amongst these royal elites, and I loved that. He was so chaotic and so bumbling at times, and honestly so self-deprecating. Definitely has a drinking and binging problem, but he was my favorite hero. So they're on this boat or ship headed to this mountain in Concordia. Basically all 12 of them are supposed to be on it. All 12 are supposed to go. And then the Emperor's daughter's also on the ship. The Emperor is very clearly about to die, and then she's supposed to take over. And they go. There are some magical implications to all them being together. I can't remember them quite right at this point, but essentially a one by one they all start to die situation happens. And when they get to this mountain, if they get up there, they're able to grab something that can empower them in a different way. And so there's a villain on board, obviously killing everybody. And then there's Ganymedes D, who is just kind of there. He also doesn't think he has any powers and that he's a fraud. And that's a whole other leg to this. And he has this delightful little companion he calls Grasshopper, who's one of the youngest on the ship. I think she's like 6 or 7. And so he's trying to protect her through all of this chaos. And it was just such a beautiful story about perseverance and love and friendship. I had such a good time. There are just little elements that I think back on and I'm like, I wish that was a little different. And that's part of what makes me wonder, like, is this actually 5 stars or is it more of like a 4.5 or 4? But I still think about it months later, and I think that's a great sign of a great book. Alrighty, last book that I physically have, Face Off by Miss Chelsea Curto. This is a delightful edition I wanted to give away. Thank you so much, Chelsea, for sending it. I'm obsessed with the foil on the front. It's gorgeous. So this is one of my favorite hockey romances ever. Just absolutely ever. We're following Maverick and Emmy. Maverick is the team captain of the DC Stars. And he meets Emmy in the beginning and thinks that she's just another puck bunny walking on the halls of the arena looking for a hockey boy to have a good time with. Meanwhile, what he discovers is that Emmy is a full-on hockey player and has been called up to the NHL to play. I love that Chelsea Curto had the courage to write a female hockey player as a professional in the NHL and not like making a PWHL equivalent on the story. Because I think it's fun. It's just super fun. I love it. It's great. Emmy can't stand Maverick. She's like, you're a playboy. You don't take anything seriously. And I don't like you. I don't want to be around you. I will be around you as much as I have to because we're on the same team. But that's all there is to it. And Mav is very much one of those captains who's like, no. We're all besties. There's team dinner. There's this. There's that. Like, you're going to be around. We watch these two kind of have this push and pull. And then later, Emmy's like, you know what? We can hook up. Like, that's the thing that can happen, but, like, no feelings, no whatever. And they're just so chaotic. They're so chaotic. This has a really great sick care scene as well, if that's your thing. It's a great, like, full-on breaking down the apartment door. Is she okay? So good. So good. It is high-quality hockey romance. Also, if you like your hockey romances to have hockey scenes in them, plenty. And well done. Okay, so those are all the ones that I physically have. Let's go over some of my favorites that I either read over on Libby or ebook or whatever. So, This Could Be Us by Kennedy Ryan. I've talked about this book so much this year. I loved it. I love the series with all my heart. I cannot wait for Can't Get Enough. Comes out in May. I'm so excited. My favorite thing about This Could Be Us, I think, is that instead of focusing on the romance, we focus so much on Soledad becoming her own person again and realizing her power and her ability to make a way in the world for herself and her girls. Love, 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 love. And then 2 historical romances that took me by surprise that I absolutely loved are Don't Want You Like a Best Friend and You're the Problem It's You by Emma R. Alban. I had such a fun time with these. So Don't Want You Like a Best Friend is 2 girls that kind of run into each other during one of the first balls of the season. Neither of them is really keen on getting married, and they decide that they're going to kind of parent trap their parents in a way. Like, they want to get them together instead. Little did they know that their parents kind of had a tryst back in their own day. And they spend all this time trying to get them together, and then also kind of realize that they're falling in love too, all on as things go on. And it was just so fun. It was so sweet, but it also at times was really heart-wrenching. It did take a very real look in what it would look like to be queer during that time, and that was really tough, but it was a beautiful story. And then You're the Problem, It's You is a similar vein. One of the cousins of the girls in the first book has come to take his claim over family land because he's the next male heir, but he also feels really bad about the way Gwen, I think it's Gwen, and her mom were treated. Gwen's from the first book, because his dad was an absolute piece of shit about taking the land that they lived on and essentially kicking them out, which he was in his rights to do, but there's what you're in your rights to do and what the right thing to do is, and obviously no one thought that was the right thing to do. And so he's having a really hard time trying to like be apologetic about it. And then the girls from the first book, they're one of their best friends, is absolutely charmed by him, thinks he's the cutest thing, but also has a really hard time with his like gruff exterior. And he finds himself in a bout of trouble because he has got himself caught in the crosshairs of what essentially is the town gossip of a man, but he uses it for blackmail and ridicule, and so they're all in trouble, and they kind of have to work through it together. That one had a lot of fun banter, a lot of cute moments where there's like accidental forced proximity and tensions are running high, and a lot of will they, won't they, a lot of dumb decisions, but generally speaking, it was a really fun story. Stand and Defend by Sloane St. James might be the hottest book I've read this year. Like, chapters long smut scenes, but they didn't feel like gratuitous. Somehow it just worked. And I think it's because so much of that book is about the FMC taking her power back, and our MMC was more than happy to help her do that. So we're following Jordana Landry, who likes to go by Jordan, and Camden Teller, whose nickname is Banksy, I think on his team, but at times he goes by Cam, he goes by Teller. Jordana is engaged to a man who is just perpetually getting more and more giant red flag, okay? It starts out with these little moments where he'll like grab her by the arm kind of quickly, or he is telling her, hey, you need to dress different, or I don't like the way you were talking to that man, or whatever, and obvious signs of domestic abuse kind of happening. And then we have Camden Teller, who is a hockey player for the Minnesota Lakes. He knows them because I think he was going to be one of the groomsmen at their wedding between Brian and Jordana. And he also helps his parents with a domestic violence foundation that they run because his mom was in a terrible domestic situation with his dad. And he kind of beats himself up for not seeing it, but Jordan eventually comes to him for help when she escapes Brian, and it's like a whole thing. And as he's sheltering her, they kind of fall into like this like lustful whatever, and multiple times Jordan's like, I know I literally just left like an abuser and I shouldn't be immediately running into the arms of another man, but like I love the way he talks to me. And at times you're like, Camden's kind of like rough with her, the way he's talking to her, but it's never out of a fear-based thing or abuse. There are plenty of moments where he's like, no, but you could do this, but you won't. Or, you know, you could stand up in your truth and do this or do that, but you're too scared or whatever. And it's more like pushing her. And she slowly, piece by piece, starts taking parts of herself back from Brian and develops a backbone again and her spirit, and she's so feisty, and I love that. And the whole time he is just rooting for her. Phenomenal time. If you do not like open door romances, don't even try this one. This is not the kind of book where I could give you like chapters to avoid. Like, just don't. But if you do, this is for you. This is a good time. You don't have to read them in order. This is like the 4th or 5th book in the series. I only read this one. I was not missing anything from the other books. They're interconnected standalones. I'll probably go back and read them just because I really loved this one, but it's not a requirement. Let's talk about the Griffith Brothers by Miss Maggie Gates. There's 3 books in this series. Got Dust Storm, Downpour, and Fireline. Incredible. The first one is a woman who works for like a PR firm has come down to oversee a new restaurant and hotel that are being put on the front end of the Griffith Ranch. She's there to kind of help them. Well, they eventually get to that, but they're trying to find new streams of income, and she's trying to help with that. And she has to stay with the broody single dad because the cabin she's supposed to be staying in was not cleaned out like it was supposed to, and it was not repaired like it was supposed to be, and there's nowhere else for her to stay. Her shitty ex-fiance is the one who dropped her there, and they were together at first, but it becomes very clear that that man is not for her. And so she develops a little something with the single dad, and it is so sweet. It is so steamy. It was so fun. I loved it so much that I immediately picked up Downpour, which is about the brother of Christian from the first book. I think his name was Ray. He was injured in a bull riding accident. He was a famous bull rider. He ends up with a severe spinal injury and is now in a wheelchair for an indeterminate amount of time. It's kind of one of those things of, through physical therapy, maybe you could walk with a walker again. Maybe you could use a cane. Maybe you'll always need a wheelchair. We won't know. But he is so depressed that he can't even really bring himself to try to do something. So he's fired basically every home health aide that's come down to his home to help him. And the last one that shows up, he's ready to fire her too. The one thing that she does really well is keeps his family at bay, which is all he wants. Like, he wants to be alone. He wants to lick his wounds. He wants to get through things. He does not want his family waiting on him hand and foot, and he just would like some space. And because he watched her essentially tell his family off at one point, and not so much like in a rude way, but just like Ray doesn't want to see you right now, so I'm not going to let you in the house. Leave him alone kind of a deal. He's like, you're hired. I don't actually want your home health aide help, but you come here every day and you keep them away from me, and you can keep your job. You can keep your job. She is in a really shitty home situation too, and so she actually ends up living with Ray, and he has feelings for her fairly quickly, and it was really fun to watch the two of them make space for each other. She gives Ray the space to try the new scary things, like some new leg exercises or trying to walk a few steps in the home and things like that, and he gives her the space to feel safe and loved in the way I don't think she's ever felt before, and it was phenomenal. And then Fireline is the feistiest of the three. So the youngest Griffith brother is anti-new restaurant, new hotel that is being brought in by Cassandra from the first book. He cannot stand the fact that this is going up. He hates all the tourists that are on their farm, and he plays a lot of pranks and lets cattle roam and do all this other shit to try and stop it from happening. He can't stop it. And he goes toe-to-toe with the new chef. And she is feisty as hell and is fully prepared to fight him tooth and nail all the way through. She has her own dark secrets going on. I believe she had just gotten out of prison not long ago and is trying to rebuild her life after a really rough upbringing that led her there in the first place. And they were incredible. That one had the most surprising, swooniest, sweetest, like, poetic lines from a cowboy I've ever heard. Just, like, devastatingly beautiful. And you're like, where did this come from? Where did this come from? So good. Love the Griffith brothers stories. I will be reading them all again because they are that good. Okay, let's talk about Out on a Limb by Hannah Bonham Young. I finished that right before I started filming this. And I'm so glad I waited to film this until just now because I am not including any of the 2025 books I've read already in this video because I just want to talk about things that either came out this year or before. And so that's the last book that I was reading that had the potential to be on this video. I'm gonna think about Bow and Wind for fucking ever. When I was reading it, and at times like when I'd have to stop to go do something, because even though I had the audio in addition to the ebook, I didn't want to listen when I couldn't sit down to like highlight things, because every time I would try, one of them would say something just so devastatingly beautiful, and I'd go, fuck, I really need to go back and highlight that. So then I'd stop my audio, I'd wait, to my lunch break or till I got home, and then I'd start reading again. So it took me forever to read it, because realistically, if I got to read it in the way that like my voracious reader heart wanted to, I would have finished that book like 36 hours from the time I picked it up, because it's that good. And it moves so fast, but it's so beautiful. But I just couldn't, I was like, I need to take this slow. I don't generally like accidental pregnancy books. I loved this one. It's exactly what happens. Bo meets Wynn at a Halloween party at Wynn's friend's house. It's kind of like her sister. Sarah and her have been together literally since birth. Their moms were high school dropouts, or maybe they had just finished high school and both found themselves pregnant, and they were best friends, and so then they lived together and raised their girls together. And Sarah throws this annual Halloween party. Wynn and Bo both show up. They're both dressed as pirates, and someone makes a comment like, "Oh, hi, you guys are totally gonna win the couple's costume." And Wynn's like, "I'm not with anybody." She turns around, she sees Bo, and Wynn has a birth defect in her hand where on, I think, her left hand, she has a thumb and maybe a pinky finger, but the rest of her fingers didn't form. And she's been like that since birth. She knows nothing else. And for Bo, he has a prosthetic leg. He lost his leg due to bone cancer below the knee. And so he went as like a peg leg pirate. And so she is trying to guilt him into changing. And she goes, and so she removes the hook she has on her hand. She's like, "Ha, see? This is why I need to be the pirate," or whatever. And then he goes, "Yeah, ha, ha, ha." And she's like, "Why is he laughing?" Normally that, like, works when, I guess this has happened to her before. And he goes and takes his peg, shows her the peg leg, and she goes, "God damn it, he put a peg leg sticker on his prosthesis." And they just kind of have this moment, and then they hook up at the party. And because Wynn is terrible about taking her birth control, and they didn't have condoms, and she's like, "Oh, I don't have any STDs," and he's like, "Me neither." If you're not faithful with your birth control, then shit can happen. So there's a little baby Bo and Wynn on the way, and we watch them get to know each other through the course of Wynn's pregnancy, and they move in, and so they're kind of just roommates, and Wynn has come off of a kind of traumatic relationship in her last one, and so she's been intentionally single for a long time and has really only done hookups. Bo hasn't been with anyone since he lost his leg and got his prosthesis. He was engaged to Sarah's sister-in-law, actually, at one point, and that did not work out for various reasons, and he has kind of a guarded heart at this point, but he is so smitten with Wynn. He wants nothing but good things for her. He tries to provide her literally everything she could ever think of because he's a single wealthy dude, and she is working at, I think, at a diner at this point, but she does not want to be a kept woman, and so she insists on them like fairly drawing things down the line and trying to contribute equally. And this was more of like a character study in a way than a traditionally plotted out romance. And I say that because they really don't get together romantically until like 75% into the book. But the whole time, you don't really miss it. They have such a beautiful friendship that comes from them intentionally trying to come together as good co-parents, which is the whole reason they move in together. And it's so beautiful and so heartwarming. I love them. I love them. And Out of the Woods comes out next month, and I am so ready. I'm so ready. Sarah and her husband from the first book are the main couple in that one. And so it's going to be a second chance romance, which we all know I love. I cannot wait. Cannot wait. So those were my favorite books of the year. Let's get into my disappointments. I'm so sad about this, actually. It's not that big of a list, because one of the goals I had for myself this year was to intentionally choose books that I thought I was really going to like and to DNF freely. And DNF freely I did. I DNF'd 5 books this year. I finished one that I wish I hadn't. And then the rest of these are anywhere from 2 to 3 star books that I read and they just didn't work for me. But for a lot of them, they should have. So we'll start with my most disappointing book of the year, and that is Delayed Penalty by Tegan Hunter. This should have worked for me. This is a hockey romance where the hockey player has suddenly become a parent. He's a guardian to a little girl who I think it's his brother's child, and he doesn't really know what to do, and he's trying to find childcare because the hockey season's happening now and he needs someone who can stay with her. And so now there's the nanny, and he's trying not to fall for the nanny, but they hook up a lot throughout this book. And almost every time he tells her it's a mistake afterwards, and that really pissed me off. That happened in another book that I read too, but the reason that it worked in the other one, which was actually Lost and Lassoed, there were a couple of times where Teddy and Gus would kiss, and Gus would say, "We shouldn't do this, this is a mistake." And not because he didn't want her, but because he was worried about how it would affect her ability to live in his house sometimes to do her job, and also because he wasn't sure that he was emotionally ready or available for her. In Delayed Penalty, there was no romance. This is a romance novel with no romance. That man would say it was a mistake, and then he would treat her like shit for a few days, and then she would be like, hey, fuckface, you're treating me like shit. Why? Like, you kissed me, or I kissed you and you could have said no, and like, you would let things happen. And it just kept being like that, and then they get together, and you're like, ew, why? I don't even think he likes her, because he would make these comments, and I'm like, you don't like this woman. Why are you like this? Why is this happening? It was shitty. The only redeeming quality of this book was her relationship with his niece. That was it. This was not good. I was really disappointed because the book before this one in the series, I gave 5 stars. I loved it. I had the best time. I was so pissed at this book, and I arc read it. So then I had to I tried to delicately say that I didn't like it because I didn't want to just absolutely trash it before the book even came out. But I also wanted to be really honest about what people were getting. And so my Goodreads review, I would say, is tempered, but honest. So after that, I read Love Unexpected by QB Tyler. And this didn't work out for me because of the taboo nature of the relationship. I knew that this was going to be about a girl who fell for her stepdad. What I did not know is that she would have been raised by that man since she was 10 years old. And that just gave me an ick I could not surpass. I don't know why I finished this. I really don't, but I did, and I wish I hadn't. I wish I had DNF'd. I thought it was more of her mom meets this guy when she's 17 or something. She goes off to college. Her mom gets sick of passes, and then she comes back and a thing happens. I was like, okay, whatever. But that's not it at all. And also I think he was her teacher or her principal also. And so it was a lot. It was a lot, and I would not recommend. Odd Man Rush by Kristen Granada. This is one that had a lot of potential for me, and it just didn't work. This is an FFM romance that I wanted good things from. And it just didn't work. And I don't really know. I think it's because one of the FMCs really struggles with the fact that her parents are incredibly religious. And in the backstory, so she and this guy are dating in high school. It's her and her best friend and the guy are the 3 musketeers. They're always together. They even all go to prom together. They're always together. And she and the guy are dating. They're together. They break up before they go to college because she's like, I'm going to college across the country. You're going to be over here. I just don't think it makes sense for us to try to do long distance. He's heartbroken but understanding. She goes away to college with her female best friend and then dates her for all 4 years they're there. And you're like, okay. Maybe she was gay the whole time and she just didn't want to break his heart in the middle of the school year and just used going into college as an excuse. And you think, okay. But then she and the best friend break up at the end of college because she's going to move back home and her religious parents are there and she doesn't want to come out to them because she knows she's going to be shunned, and it's a whole thing. And I'm not judging her for not wanting to come out and know she's just going to immediately hit persecution, but it was just kind of the way it was handled. So when it initially happens, you go, okay, fine. Sure, I don't like it, but I understand it. She moves back. She runs into old boy from high school. They get together. They get married. Now they're married. Her best friend has moved and is working as a publicist for one of the guys on the hockey team that her best friend's husband plays for. And they run into each other, and then suddenly they're kind of all hooking up. It's more planned out than that, but they're hooking up. And her best friend's like, I'm nobody's secret. I don't want this to be like that. I also don't want to come between you and your husband because I feel like that's a thing that's going to happen. And it just felt like the crux of the problems in their relationships just continued through every stage of this book. Eventually it gets worked out, but it almost felt too little too late. And I didn't vibe with it. I just didn't vibe with it. Okay, next up, The Mistake by Elle Kennedy. I don't know why I tried to read this series at all. I don't. The first book was fine. It was fine. And then I read The Mistake and I read the one after that because everyone was like, oh, but Dean De Laurentiis, he's the man. He's the man. Couldn't do it. So The Mistake follows John Logan and this freshman that he finds. I think her name's Grace. They have a thing together. It's weird. He's an ass. He leaves. He eventually comes back and apologizes to her, but he's just dealing with really shitty big things, okay? Like, I don't want to discount that, but the way he treats her in the beginning, it's like, this is not okay, even if you are going through heavy things. And I just felt like Grace deserved better, and she didn't deserve to be stuck with John Logan through the whole book. She just didn't. It wasn't great. And then I went on to Off Campus number 3, which is The Score, and that's the one about Dean and Allie. Allie is the best friend of the girl from the first book, Hannah. Dean is the college's resident man whore. Allie has this on-again, off-again relationship with this man who claims he loves her but treats her like shit. And she and Dean essentially fall into each other by happenstance. Hannah's out of town with her boyfriend. She tells Allie to go stay at the hockey house because her ex is bothering her, and she goes, I know he's going to knock on the door at 1 o'clock in the morning. He's going to be drunk. I'm going to forgive him, and we're going to sleep together, and we're going to be in this cycle again, and I don't want to do that. And Allie's like, Hannah's like, I don't want that for you either, Allie. Go stay at the hockey house. She goes, she stays. She ends up hooking with Dean, even though Hannah's boyfriend tells Dean, like, for whatever you do not sleep with Allie. Like, please do not sleep with Allie. Don't. They do. They secretly hook up the rest of the book, and they're hanging out. And honestly, that part was like mostly fine. I just didn't think it was all that well written, and for it to be such a hyped story, I was like, why do y'all love this? There is one scene that was good in that book. And it is the scene where Allie is on the floor in her apartment. Hannah's trying to comfort her after an interaction with her ex. And she's like, what do you need? And she's like, I need Dean. And she's like, Dean? You need Dean De Laurentiis? And she's like, yes, I need Dean. Dean rushes in. He's holding her. He's like, baby, what's wrong? And her friends were like, what the fuck? That's it. That was the only scene that was worth it. The whole series is so bad. It's just so bad. And I think if I had read it in 2016 when it first came out, maybe I would feel differently. But like, people still hold it up as if it's so good. And people still read it for the first time right now as if it's so good. And I'm like, are we reading the same thing? There are just so many other hockey books out there that are actually really, really good. And college ones at that. And this just was not that. It was not that. It wasn't good. Next up on this list is Icebreaker by Hannah Grace. Another hockey romance that was just... Honestly, this wasn't even a hockey romance. This was an ice skater romance where the girl is dating a hockey dude. And Nate has the personality of like a wet cereal box. What was the point of him? I honestly was really pissed when she stopped hooking up with basketball dude in the beginning of the book. That guy would have been a good MMC. He would have. I was so for her getting together with him. I thought that's what was going to happen. It didn't happen. None of this book made sense. Also, would have really appreciated a content warning in the beginning for her disordered eating. I would have appreciated an author's note, something. I know that at the time this was published, that publishers weren't really putting that in there, but they've started to, and I read this on ebook. It is so easy to update an ebook and put an author's note in, and how do I know that? Because I've read things that when they were originally published didn't have them, but have them now. And it's no skin off their back. And your ebooks get updated, like if you bought it from a approved source, if you will, if they update the ebook later, it can get pushed out to people who have bought it. So it's really not that big of a deal, and that didn't happen, and I did not love that. I did not love that. It was such a big component of the book. And also, no one talked about it in the reviews. And I was just like, homegirl's eating less than my 3-year-old nephew. Like, come on. It wasn't good. It wasn't good. Couple other disappointments that I won't go too far into because I've been talking for like an hour at this point. Between Desire and Denial by Shane Rose. I have loved the previous books in this series. And this one was just really boring to me and very repetitive, and I just feel like nothing happened, and so it was a letdown. The Honey Witch by Sydney J. Shields had the makings of a perfect cozy fantasy book for me. Also had the big sin of being boring, and that was why it didn't work out for me. I was just bored the whole time. Felt like nothing happened. And by the time things were happening, it was so long into the book that it just didn't pay off for me. Boarded Hearts by Ruth Stilling. I wanted to love that one. I did. I think the issues I had with it, it's about a FMC who is new to, I think she's living in America, and she moved there from London. She moves with her husband and her 2 kids. And her husband is kind of a piece of shit. And so they get divorced. By the time the story starts, I feel like they've been divorced for a little while. And she's trying to be a good mom to her kids, who are like 18 and 16, I think, at this point. But her daughter is such a daddy's girl, and she doesn't want to like break her heart and tell her that her dad's a piece of shit. And so she just kind of lets her continue to have her relationship with her dad, but that just means that she's kind of sacrificing that a little bit, because I think her daughter moves back to London with her ex-husband when this happens. But her son stays in the US because he is in college there, and he also is on a hockey team, and so he doesn't want to leave that. She is trying to surprise him for his birthday. She goes down to the local arena where the pro hockey team plays to pick up some tickets, and she physically runs into one of the players, not realizing that's who he is. She takes her son to the game. He sees her there and is like, holy shit, that's the hot girl I ran into in the hall and that I have been talking about to my friends. It was like, God, I need to find her. So he tries to get her to go out with him after. It's a whole thing. I liked the beginning of their courtship. What I didn't like about this is the latter half of the book. When they're finally together, they're happy. He turns into this like overly macho, protective dude about her with her ex. And I just didn't like the way he handled it, because there would be moments where she'd tell him like, I don't want you to act this way, or I don't like when you try to like do this and make this decision for me. Like, it just feels wrong in whatever way, or hey, like he used to treat me like this, like please don't do this. And he would be like, oh baby, I'm so sorry, whatever, and then would just do it. And I just felt like she didn't properly punish him for acting that way. And I also just feel like he acted like a giant man-child when they had to share Christmas with him, and I didn't like that. So yeah, he was a great hero of the book for the first like 70%, and then he turned into a giant man-child, and I hated that. So disappointing. I think that's it. I have more books on the list, but I really don't have anything to say about them. It was just that they were meh. It wasn't great. So what I will do is make a graphic of all the books that I either DNF'd or thought were disappointing, so that you can see all of them. And if you want to know more about them, my DMs are open, and so are the comments. But thanks for sticking around for this feature-length film of a video. I will be back with more soon. Bye.